the first thing I did was to sculpt the prosthetic that I was going to use for this look. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, I can't show very much of that process, and anyway, this is pretty much my first sculpt, so I'm really not someone that should be giving advice on it, but if you do want to see any more of that process, feel free to let me know in the comments and I can try and make a longer video on it. Once you've got your sculpt done, you can make a mold of it. The first thing you want to do is make sure that everything is covered with a layer of petroleum jelly. That's just going to make sure that everything comes apart easier later. So I'm covering the entire sculpt as well as my face cast with a layer of petroleum jelly. Next up, I made the flashing, which is a thin layer of clay about 1 centimeter away from your sculpt, and what this is going to do is create a moat in your mold which excess prosthetic material can flow into when you are doing your run of your prosthetic. Next up, I'm making the walls that are going to hold the plaster for our mold. Time to mix the plaster, so just use whatever recipes on the side of your plaster. I used a 2:1 ratio of plaster to water. Mix that all up and you can pour it over your sculpt to make your mold. Once you've got your plaster poured, you want to make sure to give it a really good shake, and what that's going to do is make sure that all of those air bubbles come to the surface so they're not at the bottom of your mold where they could interfere with the appearance of your prosthetic. Once that's dry, it's time to take it apart. This was a bit of a process. Everything was really stuck together. Thank goodness I had that petroleum jelly on, or I don't know if it would have come apart at all. There was a lot of prying, I used a butter knife, and I was really glad that I had built those finger holds kind of into the side of the mold earlier. You can also put your mold in the freezer, as I find that that does kind of help make the clay less sticky and help everything come apart. Eventually the two halves separated and I was left with a beautiful negative mold. I made the prosthetic out of special effects gelatin with a recipe of 2 parts gelatin to 2 parts water to 1 part glycerin. Gelatin is a great material for special effects newbies to use because the ingredients are relatively inexpensive. If you mess up, you can always melt it down and use it again, and you also don't need any special equipment like a separate oven or anything like that. Microwave your mixture for 10 to 15 seconds at a time, making sure not to let it boil until all of the gelatin has dissolved in the liquid. You can pour your gelatin into the mold, making sure to get all of your edges, pressing the 2 halves together to get a nice tight fit. Let that cool completely. You can put it in the fridge or the freezer if you want. It looked really easy here, but trust me, it took a long time to get those 2 halves apart. I found that putting it in the freezer and getting it really cold was the biggest help to get the 2 halves apart. Once you've got the 2 halves separated, you can carefully peel your prosthetic out of the mold. Be careful not to tear it. You can trim off any excess, but make sure not to get rid of all of your edges because that's what's going to help the prosthetic blend cleanly into your skin. I knew that I wanted a black base for this makeup look, so I decided to paint my prosthetic ahead of time, just using some acrylic paint. That way I knew it would dry and stay, and it was one less thing I had to worry about rubbing off during the day. To make the Night Queen's claws, I used these meltable plastic pellets that you can get either online or I believe in pretty much any craft store. These things are fantastic. You just pour some into a bowl, add some boiling water, and they melt, allowing you to sculpt them into whatever form you want. After a few minutes, the plastic will harden and you are left with one demon claw. I painted the claws with acrylic paint as well. I had done another set previous to this that I had used nail polish for, and honestly I would recommend using nail polish over acrylic paint. Nail polish is much more of a pain to apply because it takes a lot longer to dry and you have to use multiple coats, however it's a lot more durable. I found that the acrylic paint chipped off way faster, so if you're planning on wearing claws like this for any extended period of time, I would go for the nail polish over the paint. I made the fangs out of the same plastic pellets that I used for the claws. Now again, I just used one take in this video, however it literally took me like 30 tries to get a set of teeth. If you have a dental cast of your mouth that you can work on, I would recommend that so much more. Trying to mold the plastic to the teeth in your mouth is just so infuriating. Now that all the prosthetics are assembled, it's time to do the makeup. The first thing I did was the feathered chest piece. I took some gel eyeliner on an angled brush and started out by outlining the general shape of my feathers. These do not need to be precise at all, just draw a vaguely feather-like shape. After that, I filled them in and feathered out the edges. Keep adding feathers all the way across. Now for the fun part. I went in with some loose gold pigment on another angled brush and again just feathered it through. These feathers are so easy to do because the more haphazard and messy you are, the better and more realistic they end up looking. If you have any areas where the gold is too solid, like I did, you can just run some black through on another brush to kind of break that up. As I knew I was going to be wearing a long wig that would cover my back, I didn't really do feathers much past my shoulders. However, if you are going to be wearing something with an open back, you'll probably want to get someone to help you draw the feathers all the way around your body. Do the second layer of feathers exactly the same as the first, just overlapping. To add some depth and dimension and make sure that the two layers of feathers were distinct and didn't just meld into one big blob, I wet my brush before applying pigment to the end of the feathers. Using the pigment wet makes it more metallic and shiny and thus makes it stand out from the rest of the feathers. Some setting spray and that's the chest piece pretty much ready to go. I used prosthetic adhesive to glue my painted prosthetic to my forehead. The forehead was a little too tall, so I just trimmed it off. You really shouldn't do this while it's attached to your face. Try and trim all of your edges while your prosthetic is not glued to you. I took some witch hazel on a cotton bud and ran it over the edges of my prosthetic. Witch hazel will dissolve gelatin, and so it can help your edges blend into your face a little bit better. I went in with a black cream paint and applied it to my face all the way around the prosthetic, really blending out that lower edge, and then set it with a black eyeshadow. And then my camera overheated and didn't record me adding the gold. Luckily, I can still just show you what I did. I applied the loose gold pigment from earlier pretty much all over the prosthetic, concentrating it on the high point that I wanted to highlight, but also blending it out so that basically the entire prosthetic was covered. Again, the more haphazard and messy you apply this, the better it will look. Black lips, of course. I actually lost my black liquid lipstick while I was filming this, so I used gel eyeliner instead. It worked pretty well, but I would have preferred the liquid lipstick. I decided that I wanted the edge of the chest piece to be blended out into my skin, same as my face makeup, so I went back in with some black and gold and just smoked that all out. I used denture adhesive to glue my fangs on, however I really wouldn't recommend this, it didn't stay very well at all. I think that springing for some special effects tooth glue would serve you a lot better. I didn't film it, but I did let the teeth sit in some wet coffee grounds overnight to yellow them up a little bit and make them blend into my teeth a little bit more than the bright white would. I applied my claws with nail glue, and then I went down my finger with some black eyeshadow to continue on that black smoky trend we've got going on. Lastly, I applied some gold pigment to the center of my lips, and that was it. Thank you so much for checking this out, I really appreciate it, and please wish me luck. This is my submission into the 2019 NYX Face Awards, and I'm really hoping I get in!